All right, so welcome to this new format where I'm not gonna read a blog post anymore. It takes too much time to compose and to polish I'm just gonna try and riff on an idea in real time. And this morning's idea is that raising children is more about action rather than talk. Because I think we have this misconception that educating your children boils down a lot to what you tell them. But in fact, people prefer to think that because they prefer to think that they can just get away with saying the right thing while doing the wrong thing. Because it's much easier to talk than to do. Imagine a scenario where a parent doesn't preach anything, doesn't give directives, or imperatives, or commandments to their children of any kind. But instead, they themselves lead an exemplary life. They embody all the virtues, my favorite four: courage, honesty, curiosity, and empathy. And their children see that each day, day to day. Now, there might come a point where the children, after copying and just how small children are, they're like sponges. They absorb everything in their environment, especially from their parents, and especially their parents' behavior. And there will come a point, surely, where some of what their parents do, especially such a parent as in my example, such a virtuous parent, what they do comes into conflict with what they see outside of the family. And they might have questions then. And they might come and ask me, for example, thinking of my future children, "Hey, Daddy, why is that guy doing that? Why are those people behaving in that manner when you're doing something, or we're doing?" Hopefully by that point, they will have copied my behavior enough to think in terms of what we're doing. So why are they so different from us? Why are we so different from them? And that might be the point at which some theoretical arguments, some reasoning might be required to explain behavior, not to demand or impose behavior. You cannot do that successfully long term anyway, because a child will always, when faced with a situation where a parent is a hypocrite and they do one thing and say another, or they behave in a certain manner but ask of the child to behave in a totally different manner, a virtuous one, they will not do what the parent asks them or tells them to do. They will do what the parent does. They will copy not the virtues the parent claims, but the virtues the parent lives. And also the vices. If you interdict a vice verbally but display it behaviorally, like smoking, right? My father, I remember, he used to warn me about the dangers of smoking. You should never do that. It's horrible. It's bad for you. It's terrible. Oh my God, it's going to ruin your life. Well, he himself was a big smoker. Of course, I was always tempted by smoking. And of course, I took up smoking on a whim when I finished high school. I resisted it all throughout high school. But my conclusion, my way of reconciliating his hypocritical statements or his hypocritical behavior was that smoking is okay and not okay at the same time. It's good and bad. Well, it can't be. So it must be that smoking is bad for children, but good for adults, or okay at least for adults. Words have their place in parenting. Their place is more to provide explanation, sense-making, rather than to direct behavior. Behavior directs behavior. Words just explain behavior. And that explanation can be a valid one, or it can be a false one. It can be a lie, or it can be the truth, or it can be just mistaken. And there's a distinction between being mistaken and lying. Of course, the distinction being the intention. If you intentionally hide the truth, that's lying. If you just unknowingly state a false fact as truth, then you're just wrong, you're just mistaken. So back to the example, just imagine a child raised by such a parent. Would they need to be told how to behave? Probably not. They would just copy the parent. Would they need an explanation? Would they need to make sense of why other people are behaving differently? Most likely, yes. Would they tend to behave differently just because other people are behaving differently than them? Well, that's an interesting point, and it's one I touched on in a discussion earlier last week with a new friend, which is that children tend to want to integrate into a group, into an outside group. But that need comes a lot later than people actually think, or they like to think. That need is exacerbated if there is inadequate parenting or neglectful parenting or abusive parenting, because then they can't wait to get out of the in-group, of the family group. So they're looking for a replacement for their family of origin. And so they are very open to adopting the behaviors of an out-group. But if the family in-group is not neglectful, not abusive, is loving and caring and attentive, and sincere and affectionate, protective, if it's all these things, the need to be accepted by an out-group is far, far less. Now, it comes a point, especially with boys, where they do have to break away from the family. But then again, that breaking away from the old rules, the old tradition, that is far less traumatic for everyone involved if there's not any dogma, if no requirements were made for certain behaviors. Then when the child just chooses different behaviors as a way of individualization and of graduating to adulthood and breaking away from the original family to form a family of their own, then that is not such a big deal because they were not required to behave a certain way. So now that they're behaving differently, it's not such a big deal. It all comes back to the idea of leadership. Parents should lead their child rather than control their child. It's leadership versus control. It's push versus pull. It's you leading the way and the child following in your example, which they will inevitably do, versus you pushing them in a certain direction. And what ends up happening most of the time is that parents will lead in a certain direction, whether they mean to or not. Their behavior, whatever it is, will lead their children into a particular direction, while pushing the child verbally into another direction, the quote-unquote right direction. So the final result is, guess what? Just think of this in terms of pure geometry. Like you're going left, you're pushing your child right. And I'm not talking in terms of political directions here, right? You're going left, and meanwhile, you're telling your child, you should go right. You should, like, the right is the correct way to go. Right is the right way. What ends up happening? If they follow your instructions, your distance between you and your child will grow, physically speaking. And ideologically, it's the same thing. You will become either physically or ideologically, mentally further apart. Now, for the child, this is rejection. This is the parent pushing them away, which is a death threat, because children cannot survive on their own. Children need their parents. So what will children do is copy the parents' behavior and say, okay, you're trying to push me away. That would mean death. I don't want to die. I'm not going to go where you tell me to go. I'm going to go where you go. I want to be close to you. I want to follow you. I need to be close to you to survive. So that's what they do. So when I said there's no demanded behavior on the part of the child by the parent, don't take this as the child approving of everything. So when I earlier said that there should be no behavior that's required, demanded from the child, let me clarify that. I'm not saying you should approve everything your child does. You should be all accepting. That's akin to unparenting. You're no longer a parent. You're just like a friend at best. I don't know. Someone who is desperate to be liked by their child and avoids any and all conflict. Now, if you behave in a virtuous manner, then each time your child behaves differently in an unvirtuous or vicious manner, that should upset you, and it will upset you. Otherwise, you really aren't that virtuous to begin with, right? Okay, you're upset, you're bothered, you dislike their behavior. This evokes certain emotions and feelings within you. Express those emotions and those feelings. Let them be shown on your face, in your body language, even in your words. But this is different than demanding a certain behavior. Do you see the difference? One is reacting to your child's behavior in an honest and open and sincere manner, showing if you are bothered or hurt or saddened or frightened by it, to which your child inevitably will react, versus you demanding they should behave in a certain way. Otherwise, X, Y, and Z consequences. And of course, this should be age appropriate. If the child is too small to understand certain dangers, certain mistakes. There's two types of mistakes. Mistakes that take you out of the game, and mistakes that, although hurtful, keep you in the game. You can only make certain mistakes once. And other mistakes, if you make them, they hinder your capacity to play the game forever. They cripple you. So in terms of safety, to address that subject as well, the parent's role is to prevent the child from making any mistakes that will either cripple them or put them out of the game permanently, and foster as many of the other type of mistakes as possible, because that's how we learn. Learning is a balance between not making enough mistakes, so you don't get feedback, you don't improve, you don't learn, or making dangerous or game-ending mistakes. Again, behavior should not be dictated. It should be modeled, and it should not be accepted indiscriminately. It should be met with feedback from your own behavior. One is imperative, the other is relational. One is ordering the child around, the other is treating them as an equal with some handicaps, because that's what children are undeveloped adults. They don't yet have the full power of an adult. So we need to account for that and protect them while they develop it. That's it. So I hope this is clear. I'm not advocating for unparenting here. All I'm saying, in a nutshell, is be more preoccupied with directing your own behavior, and the child will follow. Give explanation when asked by your child, and you should have explanations for your behaviors. Otherwise, you're not really choosing to behave in a certain way. You're just an automaton. Maybe you were taught certain behaviors and just that's why you do them, but then you're just doing the right thing for the wrong reason. And that's just not good enough. You should always know why you're doing what you're doing. It should always be a conscious choice. And you should always be able to argue for that choice and to explain your reasoning, show your work. When asked, why do you do this? You should always have a good answer. Not just because it's the right thing, because that's what my daddy taught me. You should be able to argue. That's the place for dialogue, for words. That is a terrific place for words. But what most parents do is they're very short on words there. When you ask them, why do you do this? Why should I do this? They're very short on words there, but then they're very rich and long on words when it comes to telling you what to do, but very short on telling you why you should do it. Let me know what you think. I absolutely adore feedback. Thank you for your time.